As you can see, based on the satellite imagery, there's still a large amount of smoke over the state of California, and that's due to the fact that we do still have some wildfires that are actively burning. So I'll give an update on which of those fires are still a threat, and I'll also go over which fires appear to be out. Next, we're going to do an in-depth forecast for this weekend to see what our fires might be doing over the next couple of days. Now, I will say that if you're only interested in one of the fires or you're short on time, you can click down in the time bar below to go directly to the fire you want to hear about. With that being said, over the next few minutes, I'm going to dive into the most important factors that affect all of our wildfires. So if you really want to know what's going on, I'd suggest listening to the next few minutes here. So we'll start by looking at the satellite imagery again. And as you can see, there is a large amount of smoke over California, and that's reducing air quality and making it unhealthy in some areas, which we'll get into in a second. The other main thing I noticed though is this low pressure system that's sitting off the California coast and should be pushing in throughout tonight and throughout tomorrow. Now that's going to have a big impact on our big three weather variables that we talk about in every single video and have a large impact on wildfire behavior: temperature, winds, and humidity. So just looking at that low pressure system on this map here, you can see it off the coast of California, and throughout the day today and working into tomorrow, that low pressure system is going to work its way into California, and as we talked about yesterday, possibly bringing some rain to some areas. We'll get into that in a second. First, I want to talk about what it's doing to the temperatures. Now, this is an easy one for how temperatures affect wildfire. Warmer it is, the worse it is for wildfire. And I'm happy to say temperatures are way down from what they were last week. I'll remind you, last week we were in the triple digits, 106, 107 in some places, and now we're more in the mid 70s to low 80s. Those are showing the highs for today. If we look at the highs for tomorrow, you can see they're actually going to be even cooler. We could be in the 60s in some areas, and then 70s throughout most of the state. So that's great to see there. Temperature-wise, we're looking great. And although Sunday, it is getting a little bit warmer, I will point out that it's still 20 degrees cooler than last week. So over the next 3 days, at least temperature-wise, things are looking good. Now, there is one aspect that you would possibly think is a concern, and that would have to do with wind gusts. Because as a storm system comes in, it typically brings some stronger winds with it. We can see throughout the day Friday, we are going to get some stronger gusts up by the North Complex and the Creek Fire, but I'm not too worried about those as it's only around 20 mile per hour wind gusts, nothing near the 70 mile per hour wind gusts we had last week. Now, when we see this storm system move in though, yeah, exactly. There's going to be some strong wind gusts, possibly in the 50 to 60 mile per hour range, especially around areas like the North Complex. But I'm not too worried about those. And I know that might sound weird because that does sound extreme. But the humidity when that storm system comes through is going to be so high that we aren't really going to have to worry all that much. So winds are bad because it can spread your fire, it can create spot fires where it picks up a burning ember and starts a new little fire. But when the humidity is extremely high, we don't have to worry about that as much because if a spot fire does start, there's less chance of ignition because the air is so moist around it. So looking at the air right now, you can see we have some great moist, humid air over us, and that is really calming down a lot of our fires right now. When I show the fire perimeter and hotspot map in a second, you'll see things are looking much calmer right now than it has looked throughout the last few days. Now we do get one little strip of dry air moving in tonight, but that's going to be a short-lived event, and then we're right back to that moist, humid air associated with that low pressure system moving in. Now I'm curious to look at the timing of when that storm looks like it's coming through. It was about 2 p.m. on Saturday. That's when we were getting these extreme wind gusts right over the North Complex. And again, this is why I'm not too worried about those 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts, is because at this time we have nearly 100% humidity over all of our major fires. So I can't emphasize enough how huge this push of moist air is going to be when it comes to wildfire behavior. We're already seeing some of our fires calm down, but once we get into 100% humidity, hopefully we see all of our fires just go out. I'm not saying it will happen, but they're at least going to be much reduced behavior than what we've seen the last few days. Now, there's also some other good news in the forecast. We could be getting a little bit of rain. Now, at the beginning of this week, everyone was all excited because we were supposed to get half an inch to an inch of rain. Some people were saying, oh, it's the end of wildfire season. I wasn't trusting it, as I have a rule of thumb. I don't trust a forecast more than 3 days out. And it turned out that's a good rule to have, as this rain event shows. So working into Saturday, when that system moves through, we are going to get a little bit of rain up in the very northern parts of California, possibly bringing 0.1 inches to 0.2 inches to areas around the North Complex and the August Complex. But as you can see, we'll just back up, look at that again. Looking at it, the majority of that heavy rainfall stays north of us in Oregon and Idaho. We get some light rain in the very northern parts of the state. The entire southern and central part of the state appear to remain dry. So if we actually look at the numbers for this one, you can see very northern parts of the state and 0.1 or less inches, 0.2 or less inches, kind of a non-factor when it comes to how this rain is going to affect our fires. Now, with that being said, I think the cooler temperatures and the higher humidity will actually have a bigger impact on our fires than this little bit of rain will. So overall, this low pressure system is going to be calming down our fires, and especially on Saturday as that humid air moves in, I'm thinking with all our fires, things are going to be looking good. Now, as I did point out though, there's still a large amount of smoke being produced by our fires right now, and that's producing some poor air quality. You can see where that poor air quality is, mostly over the areas of the Creek and Castle Fire, although the air is not looking so good up by the August Complex as well. Looking at the forecast for today, it says we're going to be mostly in that moderate range, but I don't really trust this as the upper level winds are looking weak, and we do still have a large amount of smoke over the state. Looking at the forecast for tomorrow, it says we're mostly in the moderate range again, but once again, I don't really trust this. And here's the reason why. When you get all that smoke produced like we're seeing right now, what you need is strong upper level winds, like these purple colors here, to push that smoke out of the area. But as you can see, the winds above California are extremely weak. When you have these blue and green colors, that means there's not the winds necessary to push that smoke out of the area. So what that does is allows the smoke to settle down to the surface right where we're breathing in all those particulates, and we get unhealthy air. And if we click through the next couple days, those weak winds are going to remain over the state, and especially down here by the Creek and Castle Fire. So while we might get a little bit of relief as some of these stronger winds push into northern California, I believe the areas around the Creek and Castle Fire and into the valley, I think that air quality there is going to remain poor throughout Saturday. Now, where we might see some relief is as we move into Sunday, we get some stronger upper level winds pushing in, and by this time, I think there's going to be way less smoke being produced by our fires because they will have cooled off so much throughout the day Saturday when we have all those favorable conditions. So it's pretty cool to see how winds and temperatures and humidity all interact to affect both our fires and our air quality. Now, the first fires I want to talk about are the ones that are producing the most smoke and are appearing to be the most active right now, and that's the Castle Fire and the Creek Fire. And this is really the reason air quality is poor, especially around here. But I will say that although they are still producing a decent amount of smoke, it's less than we've seen in the past. And when it comes to the fire behavior, it's looking much calmer than the last few days. You can see around this fire perimeter, we do still have some hot spots showing up here, which signify active growth. But it's looking a lot better than yesterday. Yesterday, this whole northern section here was showing a lot of active hotspots, and right now it's looking relatively calm. That's mostly due to the cooler temperatures and that rise in humidity. And again, the reason humidity is so important is when the air is moist, it brings some moisture into the finer fuels. So then if a fire gets to those fuels, it's less likely that it's just going to rapidly spread because there's more moisture in those fuels. It makes sense if you've ever gone to a campfire and tried to start your fire with a moist log or a dry log. That dry log is much easier to get the fire going and then burns a lot hotter. So that's why we're seeing this reduced behavior when it comes to the castle fire here. Now when we get to the numbers for it, it's up to 164,000 acres, and we are at 65% containment. One other thing I will point out is we do have this area on the northeastern tip right here that appears to still be active, but again, that's looking much calmer than it has been the last couple of days, and with the good conditions over the next 24 to 48 hours, I no longer think these two fires will combine, as we were talking about that earlier in the week. Now, the other fire in the area that's creating a lot of that smoke is the creek fire here. And this has been a fire that just refuses to quit. It's been actively burning for over a month now, but I'm happy to say that with those cooler temperatures and that rise in humidity, it's looking a lot calmer than it was showing yesterday. This western edge was something that's been continuously burning for a week or two, and as of right now, it looks like the hot spots on this entire western edge appear to be out, so that's some great news there. The two areas that do remain active are this northern section here and this eastern finger, although it's looking better than last week. The area that's looking the best is this area right on this northeastern tip right here, and that is because it's actually burning into where the Lions Fire burnt in 2018. So the reason that's important is this reduces a lot of the fuels so that by the time the creek fire moves into this area, there's not as much fuel for fueling the fire further. There's less combustible energy there to allow for further fire growth. Now, the one other thing I'll point out when it comes to this map is we're starting to push into some rockier terrain. So where there's more rocks, there's less vegetation, and we get reduced fire behavior. So a lot of good things coming together to really calm down the creek fire. And we can see that calmer behavior if we look at the Wharf S-Fire wildfire model. This pairs the fire below with the winds above, and it was actually developed by one of my professors at San Jose State, Adam Kochansky. And it basically shows what is expected to happen over the next 2 days, and you can see very calm fire behavior, not seeing those explosions of fire perimeter that we've seen throughout the past. You can actually barely even see where it's growing, so I think it would actually be more helpful to go back to the beginning here, take a good look at the perimeter, and then we'll just fast forward to what's expected to burn over the next 2 days. So we got very northern tip, a little bit, and then a little bit more on this eastern finger, but with those better conditions, cooler temps, more humidity, rockier terrain, Lions Fire scar, all of that is working together to really calm this fire down. And it's great to see because this fire has just been non-stop for over a month now. So looking at the numbers of what it has burned, over 330,000 acres, and we are at 50% containment. Now, I will point out back on this map that almost all of that containment is on the southern edge where the fire appears to be out. On this northern section of the fire, this red line represents where we're still uncontained, and you can see that's almost the entire northern section of this fire. Hopefully we'll see some more containment throughout the weekend as conditions allow for some favorable situations for firefighters to get a handle on this blaze. So speaking of firefighters, let's check out the personnel. Still over 1,500 personnel, 29 crews, 14 helicopters, 126 engines, 9 dozers, 40 water tenders. So all these resources are going to have some good opportunity over the weekend as the forecast is looking great. We're in the mid 70s today, working into the lower 70s. And I will point out that start of next week, we could be seeing a warm up. Now again, I have the rule of thumb, I don't trust a forecast more than 3 days out, so we'll see what ends up happening with this one. But as of right now, the models are showing warmer and drier conditions towards the beginning of next week. Now, when we look at the graphs showing the temperature, the winds, and humidity, the one that I like seeing the most is actually this humidity graph. As in the past, it's been staying below 20% throughout a 48-hour period. And right now, you can see we're not getting below 35%. So that's great to see. That has been what's allowed this fire to burn so much over the last week or two. It's been extremely dry in the area. So it's great to see humidity is going up. When you pair that with the weaker winds, temperatures in the low to mid 70s, I think this fire is going to significantly calm down over the weekend and hopefully be out. It might be wishful thinking to go that far, but who knows? With 1,500 personnel and good weather conditions, it could be a possibility. Now, the other fire that is burning actively is the August complex up here. You can see a large amount of smoke still being produced by this one, although I will say less smoke than we've seen in the past. So it's at least looking calmer, and that's mostly due to the better weather conditions we have in this area. Cooler temperatures, more humidity, exactly what we want to see when it comes to fire behavior. So looking at this map showing the perimeter and the hotspots, one thing I will say, this is the largest wildfire in the history of California. If you were to straighten out this perimeter, it would reach past Los Angeles. So puts into context how big this is. Although one thing I'll point out is it's looking much better than yesterday, even better than the Creek Fire was looking. Yesterday we had hotspots all over this northern section. We had hotspots in here, we had hotspots on the south, and as of this morning it's looking relatively calm, and tomorrow's forecast is looking even better than today's, so I'm expecting good things to happen with the August complex over the weekend. I'd say the spot I'm the most happy to see is this southern section, looking like it's going to be out again because that was previously an area that looked out and then flared back up again. So it's good to see it's trending into calmer behavior once again. So if we actually get to the numbers for the August complex, you can see largest wildfire in the history of California, over 1,020,000 acres burned, more than we typically see in an entire wildfire season. We are at 65% containment though, majority of that being on that eastern and southern edge where we don't see all that much active fire. Now I mentioned that the reduction in fire behavior for the August complex is due to the weather conditions, and part of that comes to the wind gusts. Now I'll remind you, last week we had 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. Today we could be maxing around 20 to 25. Obviously, that's still some pretty good wind gusts, but it's certainly not 40 or 50 miles an hour. And then we go back into lower conditions overnight, and then looking at tomorrow, this area doesn't actually see those massive wind gusts that we're going to see over the north complex. So that's encouraging to see when it comes to the August complex. Now, the other encouraging thing to see is what's going on with the temperatures. You can see the high temperature today is in the low 70s. The high temperature tomorrow is in the low 60s. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this fire by Saturday night is going to almost look out. Now that might be a bold claim because this fire is so large and there are still areas that are actively burning so much, but conditions are looking great, both temperature-wise and humidity-wise. As tomorrow, as that storm system moves in, we're going to be in 90 to 100% humidity throughout Saturday evening. So I'm feeling good about the August complex. I know there are still a lot of areas that are actively burning, but with those temperatures in the 60s and these humidities up near 100%, and if we look at the resources, we still have over 2,000 personnel. I'm going to be interested to see what this is doing Saturday night, as I think it's basically going to look out. Now, I did mention those wind gusts that are going to be happening over the north complex. Here's why I'm not too worried about them. I'm not too worried because this fire basically looks out. We have maybe one or two small hotspots on the interior of this fire perimeter, but for the most part, this thing's looking out. And if we actually go down, we look at we're looking at 88% containment. So they almost have this entire fire perimeter contained. And this number of 318,000 acres has been hovering around that number for the last couple of days now. So I did mention the wind gusts, though. That is something I'm thinking about as we move into Saturday when that storm system comes in. Up to 40, possibly 50 mile per hour wind gusts in some of the drainages and valleys. But here's why I'm not too worried about it. As this storm system comes through and we do get these extreme wind gusts that I typically would be worried about when it comes to wildfire behavior, our temperatures are in the 50s. And if we look at humidity, we're in the high 60s to possibly even 80s at some points. So while the wind gusts could have led to some extreme fire behavior, when you have low temperatures and high humidity, I just don't see this one flaring back up again. So I'm predicting by Saturday night, North Complex is going to be out. We're not going to have to worry about it again, and hopefully we get up to maybe 95% containment. So by the time that warm up and drier conditions come in next week, we have nothing to worry about with this one. Now, the other one I will point out also in this area is the Zogg Fire. And I haven't mentioned this in the last couple days because over the last couple days it's basically looked like there is no hotspots and it hasn't been growing at all. So when it comes to the Zogg Fire, we're at 56,000 acres, but we're already at 95% containment. I'll also point out the other fire that started the same day as the Zogg Fire, and that was the Glass Fire. With both the Zogg and the Glass, I was extremely worried about them because the first couple days they had just explosive fire behavior. I'll remind you, this is when we had triple-digit temperatures, 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts, and these fires just blew up over a 2-day period. I'm happy to say with the Glass Fire, just like with the Zogg Fire and hopefully the North Complex, basically looks like it's out right now. And if we go to the numbers, that's been hovering around the same number for the last couple days. 67,000 acres burned with the Glass Fire. I don't expect that to go up anymore, and we are at 74% containment. Now, the last fire I'll mention real quick is all the way down in Southern California, and I haven't mentioned this one in a while because it hasn't been doing much in the last few days, but it's interesting just to bring back up because it did previously look out before and then flared back up again, but as you can see right now, looking like it's out, no hotspots remaining, and when we go to the numbers for the Bobcat Fire, it's staying around 116,000 acres roughly, but we're at 90% containment. Now, when it comes to the Zogg, the Glass, the Bobcat Fire, and the North Complex, we've got great conditions both today and tomorrow. So I expect these fires to be wrapped up and done, which is exactly what we want to see. Now, with that being said, I know with the good conditions this weekend and the possible rain event that people were getting excited about towards the beginning of this week, people were saying could be the end of the 2020 California wildfire season. I wouldn't go that far. Next week is looking warm and dry, and October is typically one of our worst wildfire months. So I wouldn't say we're in the clear yet. So I'm going to continue to do these updates every single day until we can officially say that this terrible wildfire season is behind us. Just to go over some of the stats, there have been over 8,000 wildfires this year. We've burned over 4 million acres, double the previous average. We've had the largest wildfire in the history of California, also double the previous record, and we've had just some massive fires. If you look at the August Complex, the SNU, LNU, Creek Fire, and North Complex, and now the SQF Complex, those were all this year. So on the top 20 list, and especially the top 6, 5 of those burned in the 2020 California wildfire season. So while I don't think we're done with it yet, things are at least looking up over the next couple of days. Now, as always, if you're a member of CAL FIRE or the U.S. Forest Service, thank you for all the amazing work you do. Thank you to San Jose State and Dr. Craig Clements for teaching me basically everything I know about wildfire. And if you or any of your friends or family have been affected by these wildfires, my thoughts and prayers go out to you, and thanks for watching.